The Galactic Council had ruled for 17,000 cycles without a single vote of dissent, which should have been their first clue that something was catastrophically wrong with their democratic process. But when you're an alliance of 43 species who've evolved past concepts like disagreement and having a spine, you tend to miss the obvious warning signs, like the fact that your entire civilization is built on a foundation of polite cowardice, masquerading as enlightened pacifism. I'm Crixthal, a Vorian trade liaison, and I was there when everything fell apart. Not at the front lines, mind you, because I'm a reasonable being who values my internal organs remaining internal. But I had the misfortune of being assigned to monitor Earth, that peculiar little mudball orbiting an unremarkable yellow star, populated by a species so aggressively unstable that their own planet spent billions of years trying to kill them before they even invented agriculture. The humans had been part of the council for maybe 3 cycles, barely enough time to learn where the bathrooms were in the diplomatic quarter, when the Zethric Dominion decided to test our defenses. The Zethric were your typical expansionist nightmare, 8 feet tall, covered in natural armor plating, equipped with 4 arms that could each bench press a small spacecraft, and cursed with a complete absence of anything resembling chill. They'd been eyeing council space for decades, probing our borders, sending increasingly aggressive diplomatic messages that basically amounted to "nice planets you've got there. Shame if something happened to them." The council's response? A strongly worded letter. I'm not kidding. 17,000 cycles of unchallenged rule had given them the strategic mindset of a particularly passive houseplant. The Zethric attacked Velar Prime first, a Delphian colony world known for its spectacular architecture and its population's deeply held belief that violence was always, without exception, morally wrong. The Delphians didn't even have a word for military in their language. They had to borrow one from ancient Vorian, and it translated roughly to people who are very confused about conflict resolution. I watched the footage from my post on Earth's orbital station. The Delphians, bless their crystallized protein hearts, tried to negotiate with the Zethric ground forces. They set up meditation circles. They offered cultural exchange programs. One particularly optimistic group attempted to resolve the invasion through interpretive dance. The Zethric leveled their capital city in 4 hours. The council convened an emergency session, which meant they sat around for 6 days arguing about the proper procedural format for discussing an existential threat. The Nalthine representative suggested we form a subcommittee to study the possibility of eventually considering whether we might potentially look into the theoretical framework of a defensive posture. The Quarksy delegate proposed we send the Zethric a gift basket. I'm not making this up. A gift basket. With artisanal cheeses. Meanwhile, the Zethric carved through 3 more systems like a hot fusion cutter through ceremonial butter. The council species evacuated in orderly fashion, because even when facing annihilation, they couldn't bring themselves to cause a traffic jam. Billions of beings fled their homeworlds with nothing but the clothes on their backs and an apologetic demeanor, convinced that surely there must be some diplomatic solution they'd overlooked. That's when the human delegation requested permission to speak. Ambassador Keiko Tanaka stood before the council, a woman who looked like she could barely reach the podium without assistance, with soft features and a grandmother's warm smile that made you want to offer her tea and cookies. The council elders practically sighed with relief. Finally, someone who understood the civilized approach to problem-solving. Esteemed members of the Galactic Council, she began, her voice gentle, almost musical. We've reviewed the Zethric situation extensively. We've analyzed their tactics, their supply lines, their command structure, and their apparent belief that diplomatic immunity doesn't apply to them. The council representatives nodded encouragingly. Perhaps she would suggest a more eloquently worded letter, a gift basket with better cheeses. Tanaka's smile didn't waver. We'd like to propose an alternative solution. We're going to kick their asses so hard their great-great-grandchildren will be born walking backward. The translation software crashed. I'm serious, the advanced AI-driven linguistic processors that could handle 14,000 languages simultaneously just gave up and displayed an error message that roughly translated to "I need to lie down for a moment." The Quarksy delegate's skin flashed through 17 colors of shock. Surely you don't mean physical contention. Oh, I mean significantly more than confrontation, Tanaka replied, still smiling that grandmother smile. We're talking about a comprehensive military response that will serve as an educational opportunity for anyone else in the galaxy who's unclear about the concept of boundaries. The council chamber erupted in horrified murmuring. The very concept of organized violence made most of them physically uncomfortable. The Nalthene representative actually fainted, though to be fair, Nalthene faint when they encounter unexpected architectural choices, so that wasn't saying much. Ambassador Tanaka, the council prime, wheezed, his vocal sac quivering with distress. Violence is never the answer. The Galactic Council was founded on principles of peaceful coexistence and mutual understanding. We must find a diplomatic solution. You had 3 cycles to find a diplomatic solution, Tanaka said, and for the first time, her smile acquired an edge that made my survival instincts start screaming. The Zethric have now occupied 17 systems. They've enslaved or eliminated approximately 42 billion sentients. They've ignored every diplomatic overture, laughed at every peace offering, and used your gift basket as target practice. She paused. Well, after they ate the cheese was apparently quite good, but surely, no, Tanaka interrupted, and the word had the finality of a fusion reactor shutting down. Here's what's going to happen. Earth is invoking Article 73 of the Council Charter, the Mutual Defense Clause. We're going to deploy our military assets to halt the Zethric advance. You can either authorize this action, or you can explain to your constituents why you chose procedural purity over their survival. I'd read Earth's admission documents. I'd reviewed their military assessments. On paper, humanity had 6 battle-ready spacecraft, 12,000 ground troops, and weapons technology that the Council's experts had classified as charmingly primitive, like watching children play with sticks. The general consensus was that humans were nice enough but clearly out of their depth in galactic affairs, useful for manual labor and creative swearing, but not much else. The Council, faced with the choice between maintaining their principles and admitting they were completely useless, chose the third option. They abstained from voting and decided to observe the situation as it developed. Cowards. Dignified, well-mannered, philosophically sophisticated cowards, but cowards nonetheless. Tanaka bowed politely, thanked the council for their time, and left the chamber. I followed her because my job was to monitor Earth and because I had a terrible suspicion that I was about to witness something historically significant. The kind of thing that future civilizations would study while shaking their heads in disbelief. Ambassador, I called out, my translator struggling to match her pace. Surely you understand the tactical situation? The Zethric have a fleet of 900 warships. Their ground forces number in the tens of millions. Earth has 6 ships. She stopped, turned, and that grandmother smile was back. Crixthal, right? The Vorian liaison? Yes, Ambassador. Tell me something, Crixthal. How many times has Voria been invaded in its history? I blinked, confused by the question. Never? We've been at peace for as long as our historical records go back. Exactly, she said softly. You've forgotten something that Earth learned a long time ago, written in blood across every continent, burned into our collective memory through 10,000 years of warfare. Peace is not the absence of violence. Peace is what you get when everyone knows that starting a fight will cost them more than they could possibly gain. I don't understand. You will, Tanaka said. The Zethric are about to receive an education, and so is the rest of the galaxy. She wasn't kidding. Earth's 6 ships arrived in the Velar system 3 days later. The Council's military advisors, and yes, I use that term loosely for beings whose idea of tactical planning involved proper seating arrangements, watched the sensor data with confused interest. The human vessels were larger than expected, their energy signatures off the charts, and they moved with a precision that seemed almost eager. The Zethric fleet, 900 strong, detected the human approach and responded with their standard intimidation tactic. They surrounded the 6 human ships, weapons charged, and broadcast a surrender demand on all frequencies. The human response was a single message, 3 words long: delivered in the most commonly used galactic trade language with perfect pronunciation and deliberate clarity. Come and try. What happened next violated approximately 37 treaties regarding acceptable combat practices, 6 laws of physics that the Council had previously considered immutable, and every single expectation about what warfare was supposed to look like. The lead human ship designated the UNS Indomitable, because humans apparently named their weapons with the subtlety of an exploding star, opened fire with what their tactical database cheerfully classified as kinetic projectiles. The Council observers assumed this meant primitive, ballistic weapons, the kind of thing you'd find in a museum next to stone knives and animal pelts. They were technically correct. The projectiles were kinetic. They were also traveling at 0.97 light speed, massed approximately 5,000 kilograms each, and hit with enough force to crack a planet's crust. The first Zethric battleship simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, the next moment there was an expanding cloud of superheated plasma and a shock wave that disabled 6 neighboring vessels. The human ships didn't slow down, didn't stop to negotiate, didn't even broadcast a threatening message. They just kept firing, kept moving, kept turning the Zethric formation into an expanding debris field that would eventually form a new asteroid belt, and they were laughing. I could hear it on the open channels, human crew members actually laughing as they systematically dismantled 900 warships, like a child pulling apart a disappointing toy. Target locked, goodbye ugly. That's 3 for me, Rodriguez owes me 20 credits. Hey Zethric, remember when you thought invading was a good idea? No? Don't worry, we'll remind you. The Zethric, to their credit, didn't panic immediately. They'd conquered 47 systems. They knew how to fight. They scattered, regrouped, attempted to flank the human vessels, fired their plasma cannons, weapons that could melt through standard Council shielding like it wasn't even there. The human shields just ignored them. Absorbed the energy, converted it to power their own weapons, and kept coming. That's when the Zethric started panicking. They broke formation. They called for reinforcements. They broadcast on every frequency, demanding to know what kind of insane species brings weapons like this to what was supposed to be an easy conquest. The UNS Indomitable's captain, a woman named Diana Okonkwo, whose service record included 2 wars, 3 peacekeeping operations, and a bar fight that had become legendary across human military academies, responded personally. "You invaded Delphian space," she said, her voice calm, almost conversational. "They're pacifists. They literally couldn't fight back if they wanted to. You knew that. You counted on it. So let me explain something about humans. We're not pacifists. We're not even remotely close. We're the species that looked at our own beautiful planet and spent 10,000 years trying to kill each other over rocks, rivers, religious differences, and at least 1 war over a bucket. An actual bucket. The Zethric fleet was down to 600 ships. Then 400. Then 200. The Zethric commander finally managed to get a transmission through, his 4 arms gesturing frantically, his armored faceplates flaring in what I'd learned was their species' expression of extreme agitation. "You cannot do this. The Galactic Council forbids offensive military action. You violate every treaty of civilized warfare." Captain Okonkwo's laugh could have frozen hydrogen. "Civilized warfare? You enslaved 42 billion beings, and you want to lecture us about civilization? Here's the thing about humans, Commander. We wrote the book on warfare, literally. We have thousands of them. Sun Tzu, Clausewitz, Machiavelli, and those are just the famous ones. We've been perfecting the art of breaking things and people for our entire existence. And you know what we learned?" She paused. And I swear the silence on that channel had weight to it. The only thing that stops a bully is getting punched in the face so hard they reconsider their life choices. The human fleet stopped firing. The Zethric had maybe 70 ships left, limping, damaged, their formations completely destroyed. They should have run. Any sane species would have jumped to FTL and never looked back. But the Zethric, committed to their own destruction with admirable thoroughness, decided to play their final card. They deployed their ground invasion force, 4 million soldiers in drop pods, heading straight for Valar Prime's surface, presumably to take hostages or establish leverage, or do whatever it is that losing militaries do when they're too proud to admit they've lost. "Oh," Okonkwo said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "You want to do ground combat? Hold on." The human ships repositioned, and I watched in fascinated horror as they deployed their own forces. Not 4 million soldiers, the humans only had 12,000 troops available, according to every intelligence briefing I'd read. What landed on Valar Prime were 12,000 humans in powered armor that made the Zethric's natural plating look like decorative pottery, carrying weapons that a sane civilization would classify as war crimes, supported by autonomous combat units that moved like metal predators and thought like tactical geniuses. The battle lasted 4 hours. 4 hours of the most one-sided carnage I'd ever witnessed, broadcast on every council channel, because the humans wanted everyone to see it, wanted the galaxy to understand exactly what they were capable of when properly motivated. The Zethric fought bravely. I'll give them that. Their soldiers were trained, disciplined, equipped with excellent weapons and supported by heavy armor. They should have been able to hold their own against a force they outnumbered 300 to 1. They lasted 4 hours. I watched a single human squad, 6 soldiers designated as Marines, which apparently means organized violence enthusiasts, take on a Zethric battalion of 300 warriors. The Marines didn't just win. They won while casually chatting about something called football scores, and arguing about whose turn it was to buy drinks when they got back to base. Left flank, 3 heavies incoming. Chen, you got this.
Yeah, I got it.
Hey, did you guys see the game last night? Focused on not dying here, thanks. Multitask, Rodriguez. It's called professionalism. The Zethric threw everything they had at the human positions. Heavy plasma cannons, chemical weapons, kinetic bombardment, tactical nuclear devices. Yes, they actually used nuclear weapons on a planet they were trying to conquer, because tactical genius clearly wasn't their strong suit. The humans' armor shrugged it off, their shields adapted, and they kept advancing with the inexorable patience of a glacier that had learned to shoot back. I had the dubious privilege of monitoring the command frequency, listening to human officers coordinating their forces with the kind of casual efficiency that suggested this was, for them, a fairly routine operation. "Lieutenant Yuki, your platoon is lagging. Speed it up." "Sorry, Major. The enemy keeps getting in the way." "It's very inconsiderate of them." "Well, explain proper battlefield etiquette while you shoot them. We have a schedule." "Yes, ma'am. Any preference on how we explain it?" "Interpretive violence. Be creative." The Delphian survivors emerging from their shelters after the battle found themselves face-to-face with human soldiers who just reduced an invasion force to a historical footnote. The cultural disconnect was immediate and profound. The Delphians, programmed by evolution and culture to respond to all conflict with mediation and understanding, tried to thank the humans by offering them counseling for the trauma they must have experienced. They brought meditation guides. They suggested group therapy sessions. One Marine, a man named Takeshi Yamamoto, whose armor was scorched and dented from direct plasma hits, accepted their offerings with polite confusion. "Ma'am, I appreciate the concern, but I'm fine. This is literally what we train for." "But you engaged in violence," the Delphian civilian said, her voice quivering with sympathetic distress. "Surely that must have damaged your psychological equilibrium, created moral confusion, induced existential crisis." Yamamoto looked at his squadmates. They looked back at him. One of them shrugged. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "my people have been engaging in organized violence since we figured out how to tie rocks to sticks. We've had approximately 10,000 years to develop coping mechanisms. We'll be okay." The Delphian looked like she wanted to argue, but a Zethric combat unit chose that moment to make one last desperate assault on the position. The humans eliminated the threat in approximately 12 seconds, then returned to the conversation as if nothing had happened. "As I was saying," Yamamoto continued, "we appreciate the concern, but we're good. Maybe focus on rebuilding your infrastructure. We'll handle the cleanup." Back in orbit, the remnants of the Zethric fleet attempted one final gambit, They broadcast a galaxy-wide message declaring that humanity was a dangerous, aggressive species that threatened the peace and stability of civilized space. They demanded the Galactic Council intervene, impose sanctions, force Earth to stand down. Ambassador Tanaka responded to the council chamber personally, her image broadcast to every world in council space. That grandmother smile was still there, but now it had edges sharp enough to cut through starship hulls. The Zethric Dominion has spent the last 3 cycles invading peaceful worlds, enslaving billions and ignoring every diplomatic overture from the council, she said, her voice conversational, almost friendly. They've violated 47 treaties, committed countless atrocities, and somehow convinced themselves that this was acceptable behavior. And when they finally encountered resistance, when someone finally said no and backed it up with force, they want to cry foul. They want protection from the very institution they've been attacking. She paused, letting that sink in. Here's what Earth proposes. The Zethric withdraw from every system they've occupied. They pay reparations to every species they've harmed. They submit to monitoring to ensure they never do this again. And in exchange, we won't reduce their homeworld to its component atoms. The council chamber erupted in shocked gasps and frantic diplomatic protests. The Nalthene representative, who'd recovered from his earlier fainting spell, stood shakily. Ambassador Tanaka, you cannot threaten an entire civilization with extinction. That violates every principle of civilized, every principle you failed to defend when the Zethric were doing the invading, Tanaka interrupted. Her smile finally disappeared. You want to talk about principles? Fine. Let's talk about the principle of collective security. The idea that when one member of the council is attacked, all members respond. You failed. You abstained. You formed subcommittees while people died. She stepped forward, and despite being light years away, every council member leaned back. Earth didn't want this fight, she said quietly. We're new here. We were happy junior members. To learn from more experienced civilizations, to contribute what we could to galactic society. But you taught us something valuable. This council doesn't defend its members. It doesn't stand up to bullies. It doesn't do anything except talk and hope that someone else solves the problem. That's not fair, the council prime protested weakly. No, Tanaka agreed. It's not fair, it's also accurate. So here's the new arrangement. Earth will maintain a defensive fleet. We will respond to threats against council members. We will do the job you've been avoiding for 17,000 cycles. And you will fund it, support it, and shut up about the methods we use. Because the alternative is going back to strongly worded letters and gift baskets while civilizations burn. The silence in the chamber was absolute. The Zethric accepted Earth's terms within 6 hours. Their commander signed the surrender documents, while surrounded by human marines who kept making casual comments about how nice the Zethric homeworld looked from orbit, and wouldn't it be a shame if something happened to it. Very subtle, very diplomatic. The council, faced with the reality of their own uselessness, ratified the Terran Defense Initiative with a vote of 42 in favor, 0 against, and 1 abstention from the Corksy delegate, who apparently still held out hope for the gift basket approach. I watched all of this from Earth's orbital station, filing reports that my superiors would read with mounting horror and fascination. The galaxy had underestimated Earth, had classified them as primitive and harmless, had assumed that anyone who'd achieved spaceflight must have evolved past violence. We were wrong. Catastrophically, hilariously wrong. Humans hadn't evolved past violence. They'd perfected it, systematized it, turned it into an art form and then a science. They'd spent 10,000 years fighting each other over everything from vital resources to philosophical disagreements to who had the better imaginary friend, and they'd learned lessons that the rest of the galaxy had never needed to consider. 3 cycles later, the Galactic Council hasn't faced a single external threat. The Zethric Dominion reformed their government, paid their reparations, and now spend most of their time writing very polite diplomatic correspondence and staying as far from human space as physics allows. 2 other aggressive civilizations that had been eyeing council territory suddenly discovered urgent internal matters that required all their attention. The council species, meanwhile, have adapted to the new reality with varying degrees of success. The Delphians still offer therapy to human soldiers, who politely decline while cleaning weapons that could vaporize small moons. The Nalthine have developed a cultural fascination with human military history and keep asking increasingly uncomfortable questions about ancient battles. The Quarksay finally abandoned the gift basket approach, though they did send Ambassador Tanaka a very nice fruit arrangement as an apology. As for me, I'm still monitoring Earth, still filing reports, still trying to explain to my superiors that humanity isn't an aberration or a temporary anomaly. They're what happens when a species evolves on a death world that spent billions of years trying to kill them, then spends 10,000 more years trying to kill each other, and somehow survives long enough to reach the stars with all their weapons, tactics, and absolute refusal to be victims intact. The galaxy underestimated Earth until the battlefield came home. Now we know better. Now we understand that peace isn't maintained through good intentions and diplomatic protocols. It's maintained by making absolutely certain that everyone knows starting a war will end very, very badly for them. And if that makes us uncomfortable, if that challenges our enlightened sensibilities and our 17,000 cycles of unchallenged peace, well, as Ambassador Tanaka told the Council during one particularly tense negotiation session, being uncomfortable is better than being dead. Though if you'd prefer the second option, the Zethric can probably arrange that for you. Oh wait, no they can't, because we stopped them. You're welcome. I hear she's being considered for the position of Council Defense Coordinator. The vote is expected to be unanimous, because nobody, and I mean nobody, wants to be the delegate who votes against the representative of a species that treats interstellar warfare like a competitive sport. They're determined to win. The humans have a saying, speak softly and carry a big stick. The Council is finally learning what that means. We speak. They carry the stick, and the galaxy is safer for it, even if it means admitting that 17,000 cycles of enlightened pacifism was really just 17,000 cycles of hiding behind good fortune and favorable geography. The age of Council peace has ended. The age of Council security, enforced by humans who still think proportional response is something you do to be polite, not because you have to, has begun. And honestly, after watching the alternative, I'll take it. At least the humans have a sense of humor about the whole thing.